But here's the amazing part. The amazing part is, well, the amazing part is, it turns out I was the hot topic at Harvard Medical School at the time. Now, I didn't know it, and it wasn't quite me, but it turns out what I was experiencing was what was the hot topic. It's something called the Tetris Effect, which I think I have somewhere. So the Tetris Effect is, several of you came up to me and told me how much you love Tetris. Tetris is a game where shapes fall from the ceiling, as they do in real life, and fall into... You can arrange them into different ways. You can rotate them, and you try and get them to fall into the blocks that are below. If you get all the way straight across in the line, that line disappears. You don't want all the blocks to build up towards the top. So what happens when you play Tetris, and if you play it for hours and hours and hours, actually, honestly, if you only play for 5 minutes, this effect is already seen on brain scans. But subjective reports, we had people that would be playing this game Tetris for hours. And then when they would go and they would stop playing Tetris, they retained something called a cognitive afterimage. So what happens is they would go to a supermarket and they would see packages, and their brain would automatically start organizing them. They would think, oh, that shape would look good there, that shape would look good there. You know? Or they would start looking at things on the shelves and they start arranging it a little bit, a little OCD, and trying to like, they'd be like, oh, good, I completed a line. You know? So what happened was their brain was stuck, just as if you just stare at the lights, or if you stare at, that was stupid. But if, I don't know why I had to test it. If you stare at the sun, right, and it leaves that little after image, that green after image, it's green, right? Isn't it mostly green or blue? Which one is it? It's green. It doesn't matter. Anyway, it leaves this little after image. Same thing happens to your entire brain. So what was happening with the Tetris effect, I don't know why I'm pointing at me, but the Tetris effect, the Tetris effect, we don't need it. The Tetris effect is their brains were already scanning, looking for patterns. Right? Now, it turns out the same exact thing was happening to me. My brain, for the past 11 hours, I had trained to look for a pattern. It looks for a car to steal, and then it does it. That's all it does. So it looks for good cars to steal. That's the pattern that I've been doing, and I've been practicing this over and over again. Now, it turns out this Tetris effect is actually the key to why our brains are so powerful when linked with the trainings that I was talking about before. Those activities that I was mentioning that raise your baselines, those things that you talked about in your study groups, those positive interventions, those are training. Those are not just a single event in your life, but the more that you do those, you're actually training your brain to pick up these ideas. So for example, the gratitudes thing that I had you do, where you write down 2 things that you're grateful for. You do this every morning. What happens is your brain starts scanning for patterns. Just as you were scanning for a Tetris pattern, or just as you're scanning for a car to steal, the same way is true with gratitude. You look throughout your day. Now, we constantly have more inputs than we can possibly imagine or deal with. I mean, you can't even think about all the people. I can't think about all the people that I'm seeing. I have to look at 1 or 2 people at a time as I'm looking across the room, because we can't pick up all that information. Same's true in your life. There's so many things that are occurring in your life, so many things that make it complex, and so as a result, your brain has to filter and decide what it's going to think about, because remember, your brain is just a single processor. Now, when you do that, when you do these gratitudes, your brain is trained to think for positive and good things in your life. You scan your life for that pattern, that block shape that looks like happiness or looks like meaning for you. Now, how many people play piano or play guitar? A lot of people? Some people. How many people play tennis? How many people play basketball? How many people watch soap operas? No one will admit it. Oh, there we go. That has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. But so let's take a piano. I practiced piano when I was little, and I had to sit for what seemed like 4 hours, probably like 15 minutes, and practice piano. And I would get good for a little bit, right? But then if you don't practice for a year or 2, you lose those skills. Now that seems ridiculous. Why would I waste my time learning a skill if I could just lose it? Wouldn't it be better if your brain was trained, or if you were born with a brain that wouldn't lose that information, right? That seems like it'd be very valuable. The reason your brain loses piano skills is actually an extremely good fact about your brain. So if you're doing these gratitudes, you're training your brain to do one activity. Your skill set, you're becoming more skilled at becoming optimistic, because you're finding it easier and easier to find good things that happen throughout your day. What's happening at the same time is you're becoming bad at picking out the negative things, the hassles, the stresses of your life. So just as your piano skills start to deteriorate, so too the areas of neural activation, the parts of your brain that light up during a brain scan, shrink in those areas that are looking for the negative and stressful hassle areas, and increase for the areas that are looking at for optimism. So the Tetris Effect, in summary, is that you're training your brain to have a positive reaction to the environment that's around you. When you do so, you get all those benefits that we were talking about beforehand. Remember the unfair happiness advantage that I was talking about, how unfair it is that you have all these benefits.